Com joins us to talk some SEC football for the college football fix driven by Ford and your local Mississippi Ford dealers. David, let's start with quarterbacks in the SEC. This is an intriguing year in my mind because you got some new faces, but you've also got some guys returning. When you think about Jaden Daniels at LSU, KJ Jefferson at Arkansas, kind of guys at the top of the list in terms of returning quarterbacks with big-time expectations, what strikes you as most important? And maybe who do you think is the best returning quarterback in the SEC?
Yeah, it's interesting because a couple of the returners are going to be facing some different circumstances. With KJ Jefferson, for example, Kendall Briles is no longer the offensive coordinator there. So late in your career to undergo a coordinator change, that can produce mixed results. And then, of course, the same goes for Will Rogers at Mississippi State. Very different circumstances there, obviously, with Zach Arnett taking over a defensive mind. He was just so close, it seemed like, with Mike Leach, and you have to commend his loyalty to State. But now there obviously are questions about a new system, a new scheme, how that works, what that looks like there. So, yeah, proven veteran quarterbacks, but still questions surrounding them, at least with those two that come to mind.
With another year in Brian Kelly's overall system and that LSU offensive system and seemingly an upgraded roster, is Jaden Daniels, who at times in his career has had injury issues but largely stayed healthy last year, does he put up a season that merits him being in the Heisman conversation?
Yeah, I think so, because he does it with his arm and his legs. He was the Jaden Daniels last year that we saw as a freshman at Arizona State. And because of the lack of talent on that Arizona State roster in the subsequent two seasons, it made him look like he wasn't as good of a player as he truly was. And then you put him around those elite wide receivers at LSU last year, with a good coach and a good scheme, and it made a world of difference. So, yeah, Jaden Daniels is legit. And, we saw Garrett Nussmeier look really good in that SEC championship game. And the fact that Jaden Daniels, we're not even talking really about a quarterback controversy, tells me that there's a lot of faith and a lot of trust, because that was such a head-scratcher last year. Like, why is LSU going out and getting Jaden Daniels when at the time – they had Nussmeier, they had Walker Howard, they had Miles Brennan, who had actually been pretty productive after Joe Burrow. But, man, Brian Kelly knew what he wanted. And the fact that he was able to ID Jaden Daniels and the fact that he's been such a solid fit, after they rarely ran the quarterbacks at Notre Dame, just a phenomenal pickup for LSU. And I think you're right. I think he starts the season on the fringe of that Heisman conversation and plays his way in, kind of depending on the team success of LSU.
And the crazy thing is, he's going to have a showcase game. In fact, we've got a mega showcase game in week 1 with two of the best quarterbacks in the country with Daniels and Travis at Florida State.
Yeah, great point. That was such a great game last year. I love that we get it week 1. I think it's a Sunday game, so maybe a standalone moment again. And if it's anything like it was last year, we're in for a fantastic game there, because you're talking about two teams with sky-high expectations. LSU won the SEC West last year, so you know what they're expecting in Baton Rouge? They're expecting to win the whole league this year. Forget about Georgia, right? That's the way things are down there. And Brian Kelly is on such a trajectory there early that, that's the expectation. And then at Florida State, of course, they won 10 games last year and bring almost everyone of consequence back. So we're talking about a massive week 1 game. I haven't really studied the whole week 1 slate yet, but I'd be hard-pressed to find one that I like better than LSU Florida State.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you with that one. Standing on Sunday night, it will be a massive audience. No other college football to compete against, and also no NFL to compete against. That'll be a really cool way to move us toward the end of that opening weekend. You mentioned Walker Howard a second ago. Transfers away from LSU to Ole Miss, maybe in large part because of what you saw from Garrett Nussmeier and just kind of the writing on the wall of how long he might have to wait to have an opportunity. And so we go up to Oxford. Jackson Dart returns. He had a good first year, maybe not a great first year, but a solid first year. And you get the transfer of Walker Howard, and you get the transfer of Spencer Sanders. And we scratched our heads all spring long, David, kind of watching this, and we watched the spring game. And it appears, unless something crazy happens in the transfer portal that we don't anticipate, all three of those guys are going to be on campus and in that quarterback room when they reconvene in August for the start of camp.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing about the Ole Miss quarterback room right now that we were doing about LSU this time last year, which is like, why is this guy going out and getting transfer quarterbacks? One, it was like, why is Jaden Daniels going to LSU? And now it's kind of the same deal with Spencer Sanders. With Walker Howard, you can maybe see it. He's got a lot of eligibility left. Maybe he could be that guy down the road. He wasn't making a 2023 decision, but maybe a 2024 or 25 decision there. But with Spencer Sanders, when you've only got one season of eligibility left and the team you're transferring to returns its starting quarterback and gets another former five-star coming in, that is a head-scratcher. It almost makes you wonder, like, what he was told during the recruiting process. And at the end of the day, I defer to Lane Kiffin because that man is a quarterback whisperer. I mean, I always flash back to the job he did at Tennessee with Jonathan Crompton, right? And with another year in that system, I mean, could Dart take a step forward? Yeah, I could see it. I mean, think about the job he did with Matt Corral. I mean, Matt Corral was pretty unspectacular under Matt Luke, and then Kiffin comes in and he becomes one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So ultimately, from an Ole Miss fan perspective, you really got nothing to worry about. You got three pretty good quarterbacks, scholarship quarterbacks on your roster, and that's a great position to be in going into the season. So it's an interesting story, but you almost feel good about it from an Ole Miss perspective because you have three options. I would take Ole Miss's quarterback room over Alabama's quarterback room, to be quite honest. So from that standpoint, I think they're in a good spot.
So there are two places in the SEC East that I find wildly interesting at the quarterback spot, and they are not Georgia, where you got three guys competing for a job. It's not Florida with the mess that they seem to have at that position. It's Tennessee and Kentucky. Joe Milton III strikes me as another guy who it almost feels like it's going to be great or it's going to be a disaster. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of in between, but if it's great, he's in the Heisman conversation as well. And then Devin Leary coming in from NC State. I think Kentucky upgraded at quarterback with Devin Leary from Will Levis.
Yeah, you might be right about that, which is crazy because you're not going to see Devin Leary on the draft boards like you did Will Levis. You just won't. You might see Joe Milton on the draft boards like Will Levis for the same reason Levis got all that hype, because of the physical tools, the arm strength, that kind of stuff is why Joe Milton has a chance. But if he performs like an Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, ultimately it's not going to matter. Like, Tennessee would much rather have a less toolsy quarterback who actually completes passes and doesn't airmail receivers on the deep ball than they would a guy who can throw it 70 yards. Because, I mean, that really only gets you so far. And we've seen that story play out with Joe Milton both at Michigan and at Tennessee. But as for Kentucky's quarterback situation, I think you're pretty spot on. And now they get Liam Cohen back from the NFL. Their offense has a chance to be better this season than it was last season with Will Levis.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know what we're going to get with that Kentucky team, although it does feel like a level of consistency has kind of set in with the Wildcats under Mark Stoops. So we'll see how that plays out. David, it's getting close, right? We start our countdown of 100 teams in 100 days on Thursday of this week. Enjoy the summer. We'll talk some more college football with you between now and the start of the season. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to it.